Hello, and welcome to this month's participant webinar entitled Winter Safety Tips. There's no business like snow business. This is Gary Sams, the Chief Wellness Officer for Ebix Benefits Administration and Wellness. And as always, I'm happy to be here with you this month to talk about some important winter safety tips as we kind of get into the heart of winter here. And I'm recording this in early January, and I'm guessing that no matter where you are, unless maybe it's Southern California or something like that, that you're probably experiencing a real winter this year. I know here in the Western Pennsylvania area, today when I woke up it was 2 degrees above zero, and tomorrow they're calling for wind chill values of -15. So we're definitely into winter this year. So I wanted to cover this month some tips for us to consider just for safety purposes and general health purposes. And I'm going to start with some general ones that I found from the American Red Cross, and they published the top 10 Red Cross cold weather safety tips. So I'm going to start there, and then we're going to talk a little bit about driving in the winter and particularly the snow, and then we're going to finish up with some discussion about snow shoveling. And believe it or not, snow shoveling can be hazardous for a lot of people because we're not really many of us ready, for working in the cold outside and exerting ourselves the way we might have to when we're shoveling snow. But let's start with the top 10 Red Cross weather safety tips. The first one, layering up. We've heard this before. It's better, instead of having one heavy garment to wear layers of lightweight clothing to stay warm. Having gloves and a hat are very helpful and very beneficial. Particularly a hat, most people don't realize that we lose a significant portion of our body heat through the top of our head. So having a tassel or toboggan or any kind of hat for that matter helps to reduce our heat loss. Number 2, don't forget your furry friends. So if you have pets that are outdoors, bring them indoors if possible. And if they're not animals that you would bring indoors, make sure that they have enough shelter to keep warm, and most importantly, that they have access to unfrozen water, which, again, when you're dealing with temperatures as far below zero as they've been so far this winter, that's certainly an issue. Remember the 3 feet rule. And that's in regard to if you're using a space heater for some additional heat in a room, make sure that it's placed on a level, hard surface. Keep anything flammable at least 3 feet away. And those are things like if it's near your desk, making sure that paper or those types of things aren't too close. Clothing, bedding, and curtains is another big one. Make sure that all of those things that are flammable are at least 3 feet away. Requires supervision. And that tip is also in regard to space heaters, and that is to make sure that you turn them off if you're not going to be there in the room or the house with them. Same thing if you have a fireplace. That requires supervision, making sure that all the embers are out and that it's safe. And that's related to tip number 5, don't catch fire. If you are using a fireplace, make sure that you have a glass or metal fireplace screen that is large enough and covers the fireplace opening good enough to catch any sparks, or if a log were to roll or something off the hearth, make sure that you have a barrier there. To continue, number 6, protect your pipes. Running water, even just a little trickle in your faucet, can help to prevent your pipes from freezing. Another tip is to open the cabinets, like in your kitchen or your bathroom, the doors there, so that warm air is circulating in and around the plumbing. And if you do that and you have small children at home, make sure that you take out the household chemicals or things that should be kept out of reach of children. Make sure you attend to those. Number 7, better safe than sorry. That's in regards to the general temperature. It's better to keep your thermostat at the same temperature both day and night. Now, your heating bill could be a little higher with that strategy, but you're going to end up spending a lot less than if you turn the heat way down at night, but your pipes freeze and burst. So the general tip is to keep the house the same temperature. The kitchen is for cooking. I've seen this a lot, even with some of my own relatives, and that is on a cold morning or throughout the day, turning on the stove or oven to get some additional heat in your home. That's not a good idea. If you're using a generator, number 9, use generators outside. The gas generators produce carbon dioxide as a byproduct, and so it's important that, or carbon monoxide rather, it's important that the generator is outside, because that's an odorless gas, and it doesn't take much for somebody to be overcome by that. So certainly keep the generator outside, and it's best to connect appliances to the generator directly, and that's number 10, knowledge is power, as opposed to trying to hook the generator up to your home wiring. That's a recipe for fire and disaster. So those are 10 general tips for you to consider. Now I want to talk specifically about driving, and I got these recommendations from AAA, the American Automobile Association, and these are all really pretty good. The first one, avoid driving while you're fatigued. Obviously, we should do that all the time, whether it's winter, summer, spring, or fall. You want to be alert and aware when you're driving, but particularly in the winter, because your reaction time may need to be quicker than other seasons because of ice and snow and things like that. Never warm up a vehicle in an enclosed area such as a garage. Same thing. We don't want to have carbon monoxide buildup that comes from the exhaust of the car, so make sure that it's outside. Make certain your tires are properly inflated. That's very important, and particularly at the start of winter when it gets cold, you'll notice if you have a gauge within your car, which most modern cars do now, that show the tire pressure. The tire pressure goes down because of the coldness. So it's important to check that frequently and keep them at proper inflation. Never mix radial tires with other types of tires, and that's for control purposes. You want to have the same type of tread on all 4 tires. Keep your gas tank at least half full to avoid gas line freeze up. So if your tank is near empty, there can be condensation in there, and you get water in the gas line, and that's not good. Here's a few other tips for driving in winter. If possible, avoid using your parking brake in the cold, rain, and snowy weather, because it's possible for that to get frozen and locked, and you'd have trouble getting out of that parking gear. Don't use cruise control when you're driving on a slippery surface, wet ice or sand for that matter, because if the wheels are going to continue to turn based on the information that they're getting from cruise control, where you have more control if you're manually accelerating or not. Always look and steer where you want to go. So when you're slipping, that type of thing, it's important to really focus and try to direct your car and stay focused ahead of you as far as steering is concerned, and always, wear your seatbelt every time you get into your vehicle. If you're lucky to have a car like the one that's pictured here with the tank tracks on it, some of the rules that I've just mentioned probably don't apply. Some other specific tips for driving in the snow: accelerate and decelerate slowly. And obviously that's because in slippery conditions, where you have ice and so forth, if you do what they call the jackrabbit start, your wheels are going to spin and you don't have control. Same thing on the when you're decelerating. Of course, you want to drive slowly because of the control factor. Another thing is where you if you're on the highway and so forth, and they recommend a car length or a certain amount of time, distance between you and the car in front of you, you want to extend that in the winter time, just to be more conservative and cautious. Know your brakes. Many modern cars today, they have their computer-assisted braking systems that are supposed to control the car through the brake, but it's important to know how your brakes react. I know when I was teaching my children how to drive, we went to a large parking lot at a mall on a Sunday evening when there weren't people there, and I had them kind of test out those things so they sort of got the feel for what it was to brake like in the snow and slippery conditions. Don't stop if you can avoid it. Same thing, because you have more control when your tires are and your wheels are moving than if they're locked in a skid on the ice. Don't power up hills, because if you accelerate too quickly and you put too much gas on and the wheels spin, there again you lose control. It's better, if possible, to let momentum help move you up when you're going up a hill. So if you can anticipate that and you have a free kind of runway, let momentum help you with getting up the hill. And certainly for the same reason, don't stop when going up a hill, because it's difficult to get started. And when the weather's going to be bad, the best tip that anyone can give you is, if you don't have to be out, is to stay at home, not to drive. If you're lucky, like these folks here in the photograph, and you have a dog team and a sled, same thing. These rules don't apply. Okay, so now finally, you're staying home, but your driveway, your walk, those other things, the snow is falling and you have to move some snow. What do we need to consider from that perspective? And these tips are from the National Safety Council. And when I was doing this research, I was looked at some of the data and stuff that they had provided. But nationwide, snow shoveling is responsible for thousands of injuries and as many as 100 deaths each year. So I was really kind of startled by that. And we've heard stories before on the local news, or in your hometown, where somebody went out and started shoveling snow and they had a heart attack or something like that. That certainly is a risk, and particularly if you're over 40 and you're not in the best condition. The issue is, for a lot of folks, is that come February, maybe we haven't been outside as much as we normally are. We're not as active as we normally are, so our conditioning isn't quite as good. And so we go out there in the very cold weather, and the cold weather can increase our heart rate, our blood pressure, can actually even make our blood clot more easily, and constrict the arteries, which limit our blood supply. Well, that's a recipe for a heart attack for some folks. So it's very important to be mindful of that. And of course, the other thing is that on the injury side, we all know that lower back injuries are an issue that we all deal with from one time or another, but particularly again when it comes to shoveling snow for the reasons that I mentioned. We could be not as fit as we normally are or conditioned, so we're more predisposed to injuries. So in that regard, it's important to warm up before you go out and shovel. So some of the tips that the council provides: don't shovel after eating or while smoking. And that's in relation to what I had mentioned earlier. Those activities, eating or smoking, restrict our blood supply and our blood flow to our heart, which can put us at risk. Take it slow and stretch out before you begin. That can really help with lower back issues related to a muscle pull or strain. Shovel only fresh, powdery snow because it's lighter, and if possible, push the snow rather than lifting it. And that's a big one. Pushing the snow is a lot less stress on your lower back than if you're trying to lift it. And if you do lift it, use a smaller shovel or only partially fill the shovel so that you're not dealing with the same amount of weight that you would otherwise. As always, any lifting that you're doing, it's better to lift with your legs and not your back. And finally, you don't work to the point of exhaustion. Don't overstress yourself. All of those things are really important tips to follow to avoid injuries or worse. So that brings us to the end of this month's presentation. Again, I thank you for your time and attention today, and I'm wishing everyone a happy, healthy, and safe winter months. And we're looking forward to the springtime, and we'll have some more discussions to come at that point. So again, thank you. Make sure that you fill out the survey at the end if you need to get credit, and look for next month's presentation.